Welcome back to the Naija Filmmaker. This is a podcast designed for us to talk about Nigerian filmmakers, their films, and how we can build a diverse and functional industry. I'm your host, Selegot. On this episode, my guest is Kulanen Ikyo. He's a film composer, record producer, and sound designer. He scored films like Lionheart, October 1, Fourth Republic, and won the 2015 AMVCA for Best Sound Editor for his work on October 1. We talk about the relevance of sound in film, his process, and the uniqueness of African instruments. If you're a new listener, you're welcome and I hope you enjoy. Hi Kulanen, you're welcome to the Naija Filmmaker.
Thank you very much.
You're one of the leading composers in Nigeria. Can you tell us, how did you start with filmmaking?
When I wanted to start composing film, I'm not sure I knew anybody that I could look up to or to. Now this is way back. The internet was not as prevalent as we have it today. But I just knew I loved film and I loved music, And so I wanted to become a music producer because I thought that then that's how I will make music for film. Because I remember AMVCA used to write music for films, Behind the Cloud and some other films. He would just do the music and then they'll put it on the film. And so I remember with my friends in secondary school, we'll be listening to music and I would be analyzing it for them, and saying, oh, they should have done this, they should have put this voice, and listening to arrangements, and tearing them apart, And I used to tell my friends, funny enough, I can't remember, it's many of them that came to tell me that I've always told them right from when we got to secondary school that I was going to become a music producer, and this is way back in junior secondary, and when I finished secondary school, I made a decision to study in Jos, and the sole decision was because I wanted to meet AMVCA. Yeah. And I wanted to study engineering, but because University of Jos did not have engineering, I looked for what was closest to engineering, and that was physics. Yeah. And I chose physics. But I don't know whether it's fortunately or unfortunately. By the time I met him, I lost interest in meeting him. But I struggled. When I came to University of Jos first, I tried. When it was time for my IT, I went to Panam Music World. Industrial training. Yeah. For those who don't know what IT is, you are given a 3-month period. It's 3 months, I think, to go and do something practical. Yeah. I applied to do it at Panam Music World. I kept. Is it 3 months? I think it's 6 months. I can't remember. But I applied. I just wanted to be around AMVCA to see how he made music. Yeah. I went there severally, but I never got it. They told me they had no vacancy. But then I used to go to a church called Christ Academy. And they were in the process of setting up a studio. Yeah. And so it was around the studio that church built that most of the things or the foundation I have for film started. So this is how it happened. I never knew that there was a film school in Jos. Yeah. I just came to Jos because I wanted to meet AMVCA, who was kind of the only person I knew that was doing music and it was being put in films. So when that church, Christ Academy, started the studio, it was called Icon Towers. When it started, they were one of the first people to have a workstation for film, editing, I can't remember. Was it Final? It was Final Cut Pro, So, and the film school wasn't very well equipped, so a lot of students came to this studio to do their schoolwork and to learn about film, And the studio also had a music studio. There was Shedrack Bahago, who was heading the music studio. He's now with Ebony Life.
Yeah.
So I used to hang around the studio, and people from the film school would come to this studio. So this is where I met big filmmakers today, from Kenneth Gang to Yinka Edward to David Uro to Marcus Are to a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah.
They were all students of the film school. I was a student of University of Jos, so we'd meet in this studio, and then that's how the marriage between music and film, just the foundation for it came. Although it's not like I knew what I was doing then, but that's how it happened. That Icon Towers was the foundation, because they would bring their schoolwork, and then I'd watch them, talk about story, talk about lighting, talk about all of that. But then I also, when I was in university, I also thought that I would be able to go to Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Yeah.
So I wrote to them, and they used to send me their school magazines, and I would look, I'll see the film scoring course, I'll see the music production course, and I'll be dreaming that one day I'll go to Berklee College of Music. But it never happened. I realized that I'm not sure I had, because of where I came from, I'm not sure I had the talent to get, when I mean talent, to get a scholarship, because the school is so expensive. I don't think I had looking back, I don't think I had the talent to be able to get a scholarship, because I grew up in a small town called Mubi in Adamawa State. And it's not like there was anybody I could learn how to play piano from, or there was practically nobody. I didn't even have a keyboard until, I don't even know when, my dad bought me some secondhand broken keys, something. And it's not like there was anybody I could watch and learn, or, not like now that you can learn online or something. So my dream of Berklee, that's how it went on the ground. But I have always just believed, and whatever opportunity I find myself, and Icon Towers, the studio created, even though it was new, nobody knew, everybody working there or around there were students or were learners. Leon Formi was the head of the visual department. He works at Ebony Life now. No, he's left Ebony Life. He's on his own, but for a while he was the head of visuals at Ebony Life. So Leo was there. So all of us, we started learning about film and all of it there. So that's pretty much my foundation, or my entry into the film business. Yeah.
I guess you can play instruments now.
Yes, I play. From playing in church, that whole period, I was playing in church, and I was learning from the studio. The first piece of equipment they bought was a 6-track, 8-channel Tascam recorder. It used to record on tape. I remember I would go to the church at night, and it was because of that machine I decided to hold the keys of the church. I'll go at night, get the machine, put tape inside, and record my voice in several layers. I was just learning to record, because learning to produce is a very big part of making music for film in today's filmmaking business. There was a time that it was just about the music, but you need to learn how to produce. So I would stay nights and nights, just with the Tascam machine, before they now got a computer, and then they installed, it was called Cool Edit Pro. No, it has morphed to Audition.
Okay.
Adobe Audition bought it. So it used to be Cool Edit Pro, Cool Edit Pro 1, Cool Edit Pro 2, at some point. I started learning Fruity Loops. It was Fruity Loops 2 or 3, something like 2, before 3 came out, on those very old computers. And I remember the Sound Blaster sound card. That was all there was. I mean, things have really, really changed. When I look back from then and now, the technology has really, really changed. So I think that's pretty much how I started. In that studio that belonged to the church, Icon Towers, I used to walk, practice, do things by myself when there's nobody. I kept trying stuff, and pretty much.
Yeah. As soon as music could be integrated into the whole filmmaking process and sound, there was this whole new world that you could explore and improve your film. As a sound editor and composer, can you tell us how powerful sound is in the whole filmmaking process?
So even in the silent film era, they used to have an organist behind
The screen.
the screen, who would follow the film and play.
Yeah.
Two things he did. He was able to cover the noise of the reels rotating, and then he was able to provide on-screen music for what was happening on screen. So even during the silent era, they had people who played behind the screen. I mean, music and sound opened up a whole different era for film, because the honest truth, if you compare picture and sound, you see that your eye can be looking at only one part of the screen at the time. So if you have a large screen, you can look at this way to see what's happening on the screen, but your eye can be only on one place at a time. But for sound, for the soundtrack, you are able to communicate several layers of information at a time. When sound and music integrated, you can now communicate with dialogue. You can now put in sounds and sound effects and Foley, and you can actually help the emotion with music. So there's several layers of communication just through the soundtrack of the film. I mean, it makes, or it takes your film to a whole other level, several layers of communication. While in the silent era days, you could only do picture, and is what you see, what you get. With the addition of soundtrack, you can communicate several layers. And so with the addition of sound and music, film became a very powerful storytelling and communicating tool. Films actually can shape how you think, or your mood and your understanding of things. So
like most of the movies I called at the beginning, I'm sure you did the sound design, the mixing. How many have you done like actual composing for? How many of them had like scores?
So quite a number of the films I've worked on also have scores. The thing is, in Nigeria, there was a time we had, in the 60s and the 70s, people who learned from the Seni world, and then from the British coming down. We had that era, but somehow that era died. The senior for Lion, and then some of the other people, what's the other guy's name? Herbert Ogunde, yes. But that era now kind of passed out, and the knowledge was not transferred. And it's the same thing with the music industry. So there was a gap. I guess with the whole military regime, banning imports, and several of those factors just created that whole space. So at a point in late 80s, early 90s, people started trying to do stuff again, and that's where we have the living in bondage thing, and they came. So, but because there was that gap, we had to learn again. Nollywood, or the Nigeria cinema, and the Nigerian filmmakers had to start learning, these things again. I always look at it in phases. First, people started telling very good stories. You know, if you look at the old films, they had very good stories. Then it came to a point, people realized the power of the technology, how much you can use the technology to tell stories. So everybody started, oh, you need a good cinematographer. You need a good cinematographer. You need a good, you know, we were still focused on picture, you know, having great picture quality. Then gradually, people are beginning to realize that you can pass a lot more information with sound and music. So I'm still going back to answer your question. So when I started, it was more of trying to give film soundtracks the priority that they deserve, you know. But the honest truth is, many directors didn't know that it required a lot of time, it required a lot of effort, it required a lot of money, you know, sometimes to be able to get a good soundtrack, you know. And Kunle Afolayan was somebody who was, you know, he was always willing to try to experiment, you know. And Yinka had shot his previous film, and Yinka knew me from our work in Jos, and then some of the stuff we had done for BBC in Abuja, you know. So he now recommended me to Kunle Afolayan, and Kunle now decided, okay, we were going to work on October 1. But why did I say all of that? It's just to show that soundtracks for film wasn't a priority, you know, until we did that, you know. And then people saw that you can take your film, in Nollywood here, you can take your film to the next level with sound and music, you know. Although when I listen to it now, I just say there's a lot of things that we could have done better, you know. But I mean, it's what it is. At the time, it was like it really made a difference, you know. And I spent how long? Because it was my first feature film, I spent close to 6 months, 7 months. You know, I was in Lokoja in.
I think I remember you
that
were doing
period.
Foley.
Yes. You know, and then doing it, you know, and trying to layer everything, and it took quite a while for me, you know. And then at some point, Kunle came to Lokoja, to the CCN studios to join me, and then we were able to finish it. It was a good experience because it was eye-opening, and then even it went to the AMVCAs and won Best Sound, you know. And then everybody just exploded, you know, with the sound thing, you know. But back to your question, it wasn't that important. But then people started seeing the importance of soundtrack, you know, your soundtrack, or that's the whole sound and music in film, you know. And they started investing more in getting better sound, especially now that there's a lot of attention for content from Nigeria, from even internationals, you know. And one of the markers of a good film is that your sound should really be good. So people are able to invest more in sound. So the question is, how many of those songs have I composed for, right? How many have I? Yes, so most of them. It's just a few of them that I only do sounded, but a lot of them, you know, I write music for. Not all of them are able to record with live musicians, but then because of technology again, we're able to do mock-ups, realistic mock-ups, and then put here and there local musicians to make the music authentic, you know. So yeah, I think except for Banana Island Ghost, God Calling, most of all the other ones I write music for them too, you know.
When you said like recording with live music, is that like an orchestra?
An orchestra, yes. You must not use an orchestra. It depends on the needs of the film.
What are the benefits of?
So it depends on the needs of the film. The CEO, we recorded an orchestra in Hungary, and that was because that film was like that. You know, it was a film that had people from different parts of the world, from China, from Ivory Coast, from Paris, from, so it needed that more or less that universal sound, So I had sounds, African sounds, but then we also used sounds from the orchestra just to make it have that universal appeal, But it depends on the needs of the film. Somebody might just want one kalimba sound, playing through. Depends on the director, But working with live musicians is very, very, it's helpful. Why? Because as the composer, you add a human element to your music. It's humans that are watching it. It's not a computer that is watching it. So it adds, when you use it, there's that realism. There's that humanness people are able to connect with when they hear music that is played by live musicians as opposed to programmed music. Even though programmed music is becoming very, very, very good, but live musicians, they add, there's several things you can do, you can get live musicians to do, that you'd not be able to do with trying to program the same kind of music, maybe a string orchestra. There's articulations that they can do live that you may not have in your sample library. There's sounds they can make. You can tell them to play in a certain way. You can tell them to hit their instrument. You can tell them to do all sorts. It just expands your palette of colors when you use a live musician. Plus the human element they bring to the story. It's always advantageous working with live instrument. But like I said, in Nollywood, we're still getting to, or Nigerian cinema, some people want to put it, we're still getting to understand the full benefits of investing in proper music, And so some directors are able to pay for extra live musicians. Some are not able to pay. But you have to work with what you have to make the best of the story.
Yeah. We have some African instruments. There are variations, so like some of them are percussion, some of them are stringed instruments. So the sounds that these particular instruments produce, do you feel they can be produced by something else, or they are unique to Africa? And is this something that you see maybe in the future if the project needs it? Like bringing in some local musicians to play?
Every time I write a score, I always want to put an African instrument. And I always want to put it in its context. I give you an example with Lionheart. Of all the songs in Lionheart, the one that I have gotten messages from Australia, from America, from all around the world for, there's a piece of music when they're entering Kano.
Yeah.
And then there's this Hausa music that plays. I've had people write me from all over the world for that particular piece of music, So the African instruments are unique, and I don't think that somebody else or something else can replace that. And if you really want to sound African, you have to use this instrument. But there's something about film music. In fact, there's something about music generally. Music is very, I don't know what the word is, associative. I don't know if that's the right word. And that's why it's a very powerful thing for film. So for example, if you always heard a piece of music when they showed you a certain thing, after many years, if you hear that piece of music, you remember that thing. That's the first thing. What?
Like even if you listen to something at a particular location.
A location, yes. Yeah. Exactly, is something you see. So once you hear that music, there's a certain image that comes to you. And so because we've watched a lot of American and European films, we have associated certain sounds to certain pictures. So somehow, when you see something gory and horror, there's this particular sound you want to hear. Bum, bum, dun, dun. Because you've watched a lot of European films and and American films. But can we replace these things with African sounds? I think so. And I'm on the quest to do that. Yes, we can use them. We can use African sounds too. But, and that's the thing about film. We need bold directors who would say, okay, this is the sound I want. I want it as African as possible, And as you do that over time, people will start to associate this sound to those pictures. Yeah. And that's the thing about music generally. You don't just want to drastically veer away from the norm.
It has to be organic.
You have to do it while holding on to the past, bringing on new things, and blending it, and people would be able to accept it and gradually, move in the direction that you are taking them. But I'm a very big proponent of using African sounds for film scores. In fact, one of the projects I want to work on I'm in the planning phase right now, is to use different African instruments to write pieces of music. It's an album, but working with just different African instruments to make sounds that are cinematic and they can evoke emotion. Of course, I'll be blending it with the sounds that we are used to hearing, strings and all of that. Yeah. But at the core of it will be African instruments, just like the way I did because of the attention that piece of music in Lionheart brought. It brought this idea to me all over. I used the goje, and the guy was singing in Hausa, obviously, with a Hausa talking drum, but then there was strings, there was flutes, and there was all of that, and it sounded really different, but then it was beautiful too. I think so. From the responses I got for that piece of music, so it has brought that plan to me. So I plan to do that with different African instruments, create cinematic sounds, and make an album and see, where that leads us to. Yeah.
It's time to put on your producer hat.
Okay.
What percentage of the budget do you think should go to sound? So that's from location, music, sound, music, Foley, mixing.
If you ask me, I would say you should put, probably, let's put out location sound. Let's just put for post-production, I would say up to 10%.
I think that's decent.
That's decent, right?
Yeah.
I would say up to 10% because there's other things that gulp up a lot of money, like visual effects, like even the production itself during production. But I would say like 10%. If you can set aside about 10% of your budget, your total budget for sound, for post-production sound, for your soundtrack, I think it'll be a good thing, because I know some other things gulp up money and producers never have money, but at least 10%. But right now in Nollywood, I don't think people are not, they're focused more on renting very good cameras and all of that, and then they want to manage with the sound and music. Music is somewhere if bold directors spend time on getting good music for their film, it will change the way we tell stories. It will completely change the way we tell stories. Allocate a proper budget, just not just somebody with his laptop somewhere that clicks mouse and MIDI keyboard and click mouse. Although it's still possible, depends on the kind of music you want to make. I mean, if you're making electronic music for your film, keyboard and then your mouse could suffice, But even with electronic music, you need external synthesizers that add that analog warmth and that humanness, electronics to it, not just the computer ones and zeros. So, but I think we need bold directors who invest in especially music and sound, post-production sound. Yeah.
Yeah, another aspect that I think can add a lot to the final film is working in surround sound. So from 5.1 to 7.1 and so on. Like a Nigerian films playing with that.
That depends on the places we are watching the films. Our cinemas, we have 7.1. I don't know if there's any 9, but I know there's 7. There's a 7.7.2.1.
Is there IMAX one?
Yes. There's IMAX too, but it depends on how we are seeing the films. So I think most of the cinemas in Nigeria are between 5.1 and 7.1. But the problem is some of the cinemas are not very well maintained.
Yeah.
And so you play a 5.1 film and one speaker is blown and then it's not, But I mean, all the films I'm mixing in 5.1. I don't know who else is doing it here, except you mix with somebody in the UK or in South Africa. I don't know who else in Nigeria is doing it. Maybe a few people here and there. But every film I mix is in 5.1. And what it does, it expands your ability to tell story. It expands. You can place things around and add the realism to the film. And since we have 5.1 and 7.1 cinemas, in fact, all our films, the minimum should be in 5.1, because even if you are taking them to film festivals outside, the minimum, it should be 5.1. So 5.1 helps to expand your ability to add realism and even add elements and stories and add your layers. So I think all films should be a minimum mixed in 5.1. But every film I've worked on, I've mixed. I do it in 5.1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what movie made you fall in love with filmmaking?
So I asked myself that question, and I'm not sure there's a one movie, but there's a series of movies. When I think back to my childhood, there are film scores that I still remember today. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched Police Academy. It's a series, from way back then.
Is it Nigerian production?
No, not Nigerian. It's way back then. It's a television series in the 80s.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what happened, but I remember the score. So those kind of things have stayed in my mind somehow, and I guess it's those kind of things that, I mean, the good, the bad, the ugly, Just yesterday, Ennio Morricone passed. No, 2 days back he passed, So he wrote the score for The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I mean, everybody as a child knew that tune. Bam, bam, bam. So all of those things, somehow, I think there were films, back then there was not as much content as we have today, but there were a few that stood out. I mean, it was cassette tapes. Yeah. So you'd have a few, that you would watch over and over and over again. I wouldn't say there's one film. I would say just a series of films that we watch. I remember also we had it's something by the British government, and they had films. You could borrow films and you could watch films. I can't remember the name now. I think it's the British Council. They had a library, so we used to go and collect films. There was the Carry On series, Carry On Chopping, Carry On, with the dry British humor. All of those things I watched as a young child, they just, they kind of made me fall in love with, maybe at first not filmmaking, but with storytelling.
Yeah.
With storytelling. Yeah. So I wouldn't say there's a film, but then as I began, watching films, there are films that have really stuck or have really made,
lasting impression.
an impression. There's I remember the Matrix one. Even though I'm more a fan of drama,
yeah.
The drama genre, but one of the films that made an impression, the Matrix, the first one, the Lord of the Rings series, scored by Howard Shaw, made a very big impression on me way back then when it came out. And many others, every time I see more films, I see that even as we go, there are films that I watch and then they help shape my sense of storytelling. So I won't say there's one film, but I think there are a series of films, that I watched as a child that just made me fall in love with storytelling.
Okay. There's some films that as soon as pre-production starts, the director is already talking with the composer. Sometimes before they even start principal photography, the score is ready. What's the earliest you have been called on to do a score?
So I think they pretty call me late here. Most times the film is in edit and is almost done when they call me. I have not had a chance of working with somebody that. So there's different directors and there's different ways of how they want to work. Some people want to start having ideas from the composer early on. Some people, want it completely finished before they now take their time again with the composer and then do another layer of storytelling. But here in Nollywood, most times, sometimes it's at the end, they now think, oh, we need a composer, and at that time, there's pretty much no time. I would say maybe October 1 is the earliest because I started speaking with Kunle about it in October 1 and the CEO, the both films that I did with Kunle for Lion are the earliest because I started talking to him about it while in production. We started talking about how he wants it to sound and all of that while he was shooting. If he has an idea after he shoots a scene, he'll tell me and then, so I think those are the earliest that I have.
Once you're called to work on a project and you, let's say, read the script, what's your process in getting somewhere where you're kind of making headway?
So when I get a script, I read it and I don't talk about music at all. I start to talk about story with the director. What's this? Who is this? Why did you do this? Why did this happen? Why did this? So just so that I can get myself immersed in the story. I don't even start talking about music. And to be honest, most of the directors we have here is not like they know, what they want. In terms of music, when they hear it, they would, I'm not putting them down. When they hear what it is that they want, they'll say, okay, yes, but to articulate it, they probably do not know how to articulate it yet. I think it's a relationship that needs to be nurtured here in our film industry here. We need more directors to talk with composers to understand the process, and to incorporate it in their storytelling. Not just something that, we drop it on the composer, whatever he brings out. But my process is after I read the script, I just want to talk about the story. So I talk at length and in depth about the story with the, sometimes I say, why did you do this? Why did you just to know the story and the characters as much as possible. Then when I have the film, I watch it once. And while I'm watching it, I start to get impressions. I see something, this. I see something, I feel. So the way I feel it, I then want to react to it with music. But the first thing I do is to get, one of the things I want to do is to get an overall theme, a tune that captures the whole film, that captures what I think about what I just saw. So when I get that overriding theme, which is sometimes you hear it is just 2 or 3 or 4 notes or 6 notes, but to get that theme is one of the hardest parts of composing. To get that one theme that, yes, this is it, this is the theme for this film is one of the hardest part of composing. So how do I get it? I just keep sometimes one of the ways I love to get it is just by thinking about the story and getting the melody in my head before trying to do something, because many times your computer will distract you. The piano itself will distract you, So sometimes I just think about it. When I get the melody in my head, then I try to write it. Sometimes it's a chord progression. I just get bum, bum, and then I put it down, and then from the chord progression, I get the melody. But I want to get that theme, that one singular tune that is the story for me. And you pray that the director likes it. Because if he doesn't, you have to think about another. You have to find another one in as short. I remember working on Lionheart. I spent 2 weeks trying to get the first team, and then the director didn't like it. What do? You throw it away, and then after 2 weeks, you have 2 weeks less to get the score ready. So you have to get the next team in the quickest and shortest possible time. But the thing is understanding the director with good communication, which is what I was trying to say earlier on. You need to be able to understand what the director is saying, so that you do not waste your time doing what he or she doesn't want. So like for Lionheart, I finally understood what she was saying. She wanted the simplest and the purest form of stuff. She didn't want over too much. So just one line that will hold on, for a bit, with a few not too complicated things. So if you listen to the score of Lionheart, it's very simple. Simple, very few. She wanted it as sparse as possible. And then that Hausa one is just me trying to show off.
Creating there.
But then it worked well, because it's the one piece of music that I get the most calls for. So I think that's a summary of my process. So I want to get that tune. From that tune, it becomes very easy.
Yeah.
Because that tune starts to morph into different things. It starts to morph into angry, but you have the tune. Morphs into sad, morphs into joyful. It's the same tune, but then you are now playing it in different ways, that fit the story.
Yeah.
So
okay.
That's my process.
So let's say you had one wish for the Nigerian film industry. Like, what's your top priority? What do you want to be better?
So I want people to understand filmmaking better, the tools of filmmaking better. So if people have, what BBC did back in the day, there was this budget for a production. They brought in people from the UK, and then there were Nigerian understudies. I'm not saying that the people in the UK are
Alpha and Omega.
Alpha and Omega, yes, when it comes to filmmaking. But they've used these tools. What I'm talking about is how to use the tools.
Yeah.
I'm not saying their storytelling style is the best, but the tools, we need to be able to use the tools. We have the tools here. It's not like way back then when you needed, for example, for sound, you needed to have a proper big console.
Yeah.
On your laptop, you can mix and have a proper mix. If you sit down and do it properly, you can do it on your laptop. Computers have become that powerful, but we need to be able to know how. We need to know how to use the tools, and it's what I see that is lacking the most. People send me recordings from location, and I listen to it, and it's a whole. But you had proper microphones, you had a good recorder. Why do you have this?
Yeah.
People don't know how to use the tools. I don't know whether it's the time to invest and the patience needed to learn the tools, or I don't know what the problem is, but I wish people will learn to use their tools better. If with that, we'll be able to tell better stories. You'll not have a film with crappy sound, and nobody can watch it because the sound is crappy. Yeah. Or you don't have a film, that is not lit properly because people don't know how to use the lights and use the camera. You don't have to have the most expensive then you needed film. I heard a director say he went to film school because that was the only way he could get a camera in his hand. I think it's Scorsese, one of the directors, he said that he went to film school because it was his only way to get a camera. But right now you can use your phone. I mean, I was watching, which is a film I love so much, or his storytelling style, The Florida Project. And there's a part he uses his phone. The end is on Disney World. He uses a phone, because he couldn't get permission to get his cameras in, and you wouldn't even know, So the technology has really improved the tools, which makes right now there's no room for excuse for making a bad film. You don't have any excuse.
Because this movie is live on forever.
Yes, you don't have any excuse. You have all the tools. You don't need to have, the biggest tools to be able to tell a good, with proper, there's always alternatives. You can start from there before you get your hand on Arri Alexa and Arri and all of that and all the big cameras and all the big lights. But with the ones we have, which are able to shoot HD quality, record your sound properly, go through the process. So my one wish is that the people in knowledge, we learn how to use the tools we have properly.
And you don't build your craft overnight.
Yes, no. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to do it over and over and over again.
And you need to experiment.
You need to experiment. You said it right. You need to experiment. You need to try. You need to keep trying till you find. But make sure that you have that high quality in your mind. You need to try. You need to keep doing. Watch what others are doing too. To learn. And then use it in your own way to tell your stories.
Because I guess all art is kind of copying. There's hardly anything.
Yeah. So to start out as an artist, you the best and the fastest way to learn is to start. I think I saw this from. He designs logos. He said that when you start out as an artist, stop. The first thing is not to be original. That's the thing you try. You find with young artists, they are trying to be original. Oh, I want to make something radically different, which is a good and a novel idea. If you can, there are people who start out like that and who really get it, But the first thing you need to do is you need to learn how to be good at your craft first. When you are good at it, then go and do something original. But then you don't know how to use the tools. You don't even know the language. And then you want to be original. No, not yet. Be good first. I've forgotten his name, but he makes logos. He's passed on now. He used to make logos for as much as $1 million, I think. I can't remember, yes, but as much as $1 million. Dollars. But he said what you need to do first is be good at your craft first before you try to make something original. I wrote to an engineer in America. His name is, how have I forgotten his name? But then it took a while, but then he replied me, and he told me sometimes you just need to give it time. There's especially when it comes to sound and hearing, you just need to give your ears that time. And he told me that he worked after he graduated from Berkeley. After graduating from Berkeley, it took him 7 years of doing it every day before he became what he is in the industry. He has worked for, he's a mixing engineer for music. He has worked with most of the top hip hop artists, from Usher to John Legend to, he wrote me, said he was doing it every day for 7 years. It's around the 7-year mark that he knew that, okay, now I really have a hold. And so when he sent me that email, I stopped trying to be. It wasn't about money for me. I just wanted to put in my time.
Yeah.
You know, and will I say, luckily for me, Nigeria, I didn't have to take 7 years. It was around my third or fourth, I think my fourth year from that email that I did October 1. And then it blew, you know. So sometimes you need to just give it time. You know, when you keep doing it, you keep improving. And you don't know how much you've learned sometimes because you're doing it every day, but then you're improving.
Yeah.
You know, so that experience is very key in filmmaking. You know, allow yourself to make mistakes. Start small, keep doing it. Even right now, for example, Fourth Republic, you know, people love it so much. But then I listened to it again and I saw places I could improve. You know, I saw things I should have done better, you know, but it is what it is, you know, I'm happy, you know, but then you just keep working and keep improving.
So, Kulanen, how can people find you?
How can people find me? It's very easy to find people these days. There's the social media. Just send me inbox and I reply, or I try to reply every mail I get, you know. So you can find me. Write me on my social media, you know, at Kulanen, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and I'll reply you.
It was a pleasure having you, Kulanen.
Thank you very much.
We have come to the end of this episode. Please remember to leave a rating and a review. You can send in your questions and feedback on social media. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SelegofFilm, and the podcast also on Instagram and Twitter at the Naija Film Pod. See you on the next episode. Have a good one.